Mark used to light up a room. His smile was infectious, his laugh a melody. But that light had dimmed, replaced by a hollow shell of a man. The day he lost his job, a part of him died. The silence in our tiny apartment was deafening, punctuated only by the clinking of ice cubes in his ever-present glass of whiskey. It tore me apart. We'd been through thick and thin, but this defeat seemed to have broken him. He wouldn't try for new jobs, wouldn't answer calls. His once vibrant eyes were glazed with a dull ache. I knew I had to do something. My boss, Mr. Harris, was a formidable man. He ran the company with an iron fist, but towards me, he was always fair. I'd been Employee of the Month for 3 months straight. My reports were stellar. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on his door. "Come in, Sarah," his booming voice echoed. He listened patiently as I explained Mark's situation, my plea for a chance for him. Then, his smile turned predatory. "Sarah, you're an invaluable asset," he purred, leaning forward. "But this company doesn't operate on charity. There's an opening in sales, a demanding role, one that requires dedication." His words hung heavy in the air, the implication clear. Panic clawed at my throat, but the image of Mark drowning his sorrows with every amber liquid pushed it down. I swallowed, forcing out a shaky, "No, Mr. Harris, I can't." The weeks after were a blur. Mark's drinking intensified, his despair mirroring mine. One night, he stumbled into the apartment, reeking of alcohol, tears streaming down his face. "I'm worthless," he slurred, collapsing on the couch. A primal scream lodged itself in my throat, replaced by a cold, horrifying clarity. Could I let him destroy himself? The memory of Mr. Harris's offer surfaced. Disgust welled up. But as I looked at Mark, a fragile flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps just this once. Desperation, not desire, drove my decision. The next day, Mr. Harris's office felt suffocating. His touch was slimy, his whispers vile. The sterile air of Mr. Harris's office pressed down on me. Disgust clung to me like a second skin. He ushered me towards a plush couch, the worn leather whispering stories of countless similar transactions. My stomach churned, the whiskey from the night before threatening to revisit. He sat beside me, invading my space. His cologne, a heavy musk, filled my nostrils. His hand snaked around my waist, the touch sending shivers, not of desire, but revulsion, down my spine. My protests were muted, swallowed by the desperation that had brought me here. His touch was predatory, his lips wet and intrusive. Every forced movement, every choked moan, felt like another nail hammered into the coffin of my self-respect. The act itself was a blur of hurried motions and unwelcome sounds. There was no tenderness, no passion, just a cold, clinical efficiency. As quickly as it began, it was over. He pushed away from me, a satisfied smirk twisting his face. Shame washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to drown me. I scrambled to my feet, gathering my clothes with trembling hands. Each step away felt like a victory against the suffocating darkness that had consumed me. I returned home hollow, feeling like I'd traded a piece of myself for a sliver of hope. The guilt gnawed at me, but with each passing day, Mark seemed to pull himself together. He landed the job, his eyes regaining a spark. He quit drinking, found his passion again, and within 2 years, had multiple promotions. Mark was the man I fell in love with again. Stronger, more confident. We planned our wedding, a joyous occasion tinged with a secret shame I couldn't shake. 2 weeks before the big day, the truth exploded. It started with whispers in the office, then a snide comment from a coworker. Suddenly, everyone seemed to know. Panic coiled in my stomach. Mark confronted me, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. "Is it true?" he choked out, the light in his eyes extinguished. There were no excuses, no justifications. The words tumbled out, a confession laced with tears and regret. He called me names, his voice laced with a bitter disappointment that cut deeper than any insult. He tore the engagement ring from my finger, throwing it on the floor before collapsing into a chair, sobs racking his tall frame. I watched, helpless, as the man I loved crumbled. The pain of his loss was compounded by the self-loathing that choked me. I'd traded my integrity for a fleeting hope, only to destroy everything in the process. Now, I'm alone, the silence of the apartment echoing the hollowness within me. Was there any way back? Could I ever forgive myself, let alone earn his forgiveness? The future stretches before me, a bleak landscape devoid of hope. The only solace is the knowledge that the darkness I now face is entirely of my own making. A horrifying thought slithered into my mind. What if Mr. Harris wasn't the only one who knew? My heart hammered against my ribs as I raced to Mark's office. The door was ajar, revealing a scene that froze the blood in my veins. Mark was there, a gun pointed at Mr. Harris's head, a struggle evident in their locked gazes. Mr. Harris, his face slack with fear, was clutching a file folder, the one containing the incriminating evidence of my sacrifice. My scream died in my throat, replaced by a cold dread. In that split second, I knew the truth. Mr. Harris hadn't used the secret to get ahead. He'd dangled it before Mark, manipulating him into stealing confidential company data. The price of my desperation wasn't just my self-respect. It had entangled Mark in a deadly game.